Now, not only is, that we are commanded to be an encourager, God reminds us that we have an enemy, right? An enemy who is prowling around looking who he can devour, right? How does he do that? Through discouragement, as I explained earlier, right? And especially, we need to understand as believers that you and I are in a warfare. There is no middle ground. You cannot say, I am neutral, right? Either you are with the Lord or you're with the enemy. There is no middle ground, right? You cannot stand on the fence because there is no fence. There is no demilitarized zone, right? Either you're with the enemy or you're with the Lord, right? And so there are going to be casualties in this war, spiritual war. I'm talking about spiritual war. There will be casualties. Now, when there is a casualty, what are we supposed to do? Right? Like you see on the picture, you're supposed to carry the wounded to safety. But sometimes what happens when see a man of God fell, right? What do we do sometimes? We start to talk like the world. All the negative things that that person could have done. Why did this person fall, right? Especially when we look at the story of Job, right? We see that when Job went through that unimaginable suffering, right? In Job chapter 3, we see that his three best friends showed up. His three best friends showed up. The Bible says they made an appointment and they came together to visit their friend who is in trouble. And when they saw him from afar, they couldn't recognize him because he was, he had the skin issue, he had boils all over, and he was no longer wearing all his glorious robes and looking like that. He was like a kingly person in his prime. And everything is gone, and he's just sitting down there, covered with boils, ashes all over. And they broke down and they cried. They came to him and they cried. And the Bible says that for 7 days, 7 nights, they stood with him. They didn't open their mouth, right? And they tore their robes. They put ashes on their own heads and they wept and they cried with him, not speaking a word. Up to that point, they were doing well, But when they started to open their mouth, things started going wrong, right? What did they say? Oh, Job, what secret sin have you been involved in? God is a God of justice. He is punishing you for all the wrong that you have been secretly doing. While we think those friends were evil, sometimes we have to think about ourselves. When we hear a brother or sister, has fallen, or a brother and sister is in a particular situation, or if you hear of someone going through a divorce, what is our reaction? Are we going to judge the person, or are we going to pray for that person and come alongside, right? And to be a blessing, an encouragement. And I saw this illustration, which I thought was really powerful. Some of you may know this man. His name is Jim Bakker. Now, Jim Bakker was a very, very prominent television evangelist, right? I think he was in the 90s. And imagine he had his ministry on a piece of land, 2,300 acres. That's how big his ministry headquarters was, right? Very wealthy, very powerful, very influential preacher. But at one point in his life, things went wrong. Right? He had some very, very tragic moral failures, right? Some moral failures went on in his life. And also, there were some criminal issues, mismanagement of funds for which he was sent to prison, right? But Jim Bakker recalls the day, one day he said he had to clean the toilets. So he had just finished cleaning the toilets and he was dirty all over, stinking, sweating. And the guard announced, we have a surprise visitor. So he had no time to clean up. He was just brought to the waiting room and he saw his visitor. He said he was so shocked because in walked Billy Graham. Billy Graham is one of the greatest evangelists. He's been responsible for bringing to the faith millions of people all over the world, respected man of God. He has come to prison to personally meet Jim Bakker. Now imagine Jim Bakker is a person who has lost his ministry. He has lost many of his closest friends, family. There are so many people don't want to mention his name or talk about him or come near him, right? he has become like a disease. Nobody wants to be around him. But here, wearing all this, he's just been cleaning the toilets and he's wearing shoes with holes, he says, and there in walks one of the greatest evangelists, a highly respected man, a personal counselor to presidents of America. 3 or 4 presidents, he's been a personal counselor. He comes in and Jim Bakker says, Brother Billy, I'm dirty. And you know what Billy Graham say? It doesn't matter. And he came and hugged him and said, Jim, I love you. And